All right, that's Dolphins head coach, first year Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel lost his first game last night. Dolphins 3-1. Bengals come back to 2-2 and look like the team that we thought they would be at the end of the 2021 season after they lost the Super Bowl. Here's Albert Breer, one of the best football writers and commentators in the country. Bert, what did you see last night? And I know you are a reporter to your core. What have you discovered today? What have you learned after watching what we all saw last night?
Yeah, and I think it's impossible to separate this from what happened on Sunday, because that's really what's at issue here. Everything was followed to the rules last night. The question is, were the rules followed on Sunday, and did what happened on Sunday affect what happened last night? And I don't know that we'll ever get a satisfactory answer to the second question, because quite frankly, Michael, I don't know if medically they're going to be able to draw one event to the other. What I can say is I think there are specific things that are at the heart of the issue here within the concussion protocol. And the first one, I think people have to understand this part of it, because I'm not sure people do. There's no tube you can put a player in and just, press a button and say, yes, this is a concussion, or no, this isn't a concussion. Right. They aren't testing for a concussion back there. They're testing for symptoms. And so I think at the heart of the whole thing is, well, even if Tua didn't show any symptoms in the back when he was meeting with the independent neurologist or with the team doctor, why wasn't what we saw on the field considered a symptom, right? Like in other words, him stumbling around on the field, why wasn't that considered a symptom? Because I think all of us, even those of us who aren't as educated on concussions, would consider what we saw on the field a symptom of somebody who's concussed. So that's number one. And number two, and this is on a more granular level, if you look at the actual verbiage of the concussion protocol, what it says is that if there is a traumatic brain injury or evidence of a traumatic brain injury that's shown with gross motor instability, that's the terms, gross motor instability out there, well, then that's enough to take a guy off the field. And if you take that to the next level, you say, okay, like what would determine gross motor instability? It actually says in the protocol, the team doctor has to identify whether or not, and it does, and for one reason or another, it says team doctor in there with the assistance of the independent neurologist. If the team doctor determines that the gross motor instability is caused by a neurological issue, then they have to come off the field. So that means the team doctor is in charge of determining whether or not it's a head injury that is causing that gross motor instability. And what the Dolphins in the league are saying and have said for the last few days is that gross motor instability that we saw was caused by a back injury and not a head injury.
Wow.
So how do you know that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, is it just because Tua said so?
Right.
Like, and I think like a huge,
and you can't, right, Bert? You can't take the player's word. You can't take the player's word for it, correct?
And especially,
it's crazy.
And if you look at Tua's history, he 100% checks every box as a guy who would probably try to skirt something like this. You look at the injuries he had in college and the toughness that he's shown in playing through things, and then kind of his place in the league and how over the first 2 years of his career, he felt like the organization didn't trust him, didn't believe in him. The organization tried to trade for Deshaun Watson, tried to sign Tom Brady, right? So you see all of these different things that came up earlier into his career, and you could see where maybe he would be insecure with his position. And then you look at the start they got off to, right? They start 2-0, and he's playing great. And they're in this huge game against Buffalo, and they're in it, and they're fighting with the Bills. And you look at that spot and then the position he plays, quarterbacks, you know this as well as I do. I mean, you've known a lot of guys who played that position over the years, Michael. Guys who play that position feel almost obligated to prove their toughness because they're not in harm's way as much as their teammates, right? I always have to make myself available to my teammates. So you look at all those boxes Tua checks off, and it's and this isn't a character flaw. This is actually probably a positive character thing for him. He is 100% the guy who would be untruthful in this sort of situation, right? And this is why you can't trust players in these sorts of situations, because Tua is the sort of guy who in this sort of situation would probably say, no, you know what? I had a back issue the last couple of weeks. That's what it is. I stumbled around because I have a bulky back and I tweaked it and I'm good to go back out there. I think that's why, there's this whole situation requires more questions. And I think everybody needs to be asking the question, was it the team doctor or was it the independent neurologist who made this call? Because by the letter of the NFL's concussion protocol, the team doctor's the one who's taking the lead on this. And then, on a larger scale, why is the team doctor? Why like you're doing so much to put the independent neurologist in there? Why does the team doctor have power over this one? When we've seen in the past, team doctors have been compromised, right? And there are so many questions that when you look at the protocol, the way this was handled, the way Tua was put back out there on the field, and then what we know also about how one head injury can lead into another head injury, especially when the time frame is so short in between the two events. To me is there's so many questions there, and that's why this is like a perfect storm for the league as far as
it really
when
is.
One thing leads into another, this is a perfect storm, and I think it opens up a lot of questions, and hopefully this can lead us to a better concussion protocol. It's just awful that you had a player going through what Tua went through last night to get there.
Bert, you said the key phrase, and I love you for it, a better concussion protocol. So when Mike McDaniel says, hey, absolutely, we followed the rules. Okay, great, Mike. You're missing the point. You're glossing over that, following the rules, if the rules are not set up properly, if they're not designed to get to the bottom of an issue, then you're following the rules, but you're still not investigating deeply enough if the player is concussed. Right. Here's the other thing. Bert, with your association with Boston and mine, we've been fortunate. We know Boston University has done a lot of work on head trauma and CTE, leading the country in those departments. And in partnership with them sometimes, or as a complement to them, you have something called the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Yep. And they've done a lot of work on concussion protocols in all sports. And some of the things, I would just recommend that players and coaches and members of the media really get into this and educate themselves on it. Because one of the things that is clear, when Mike McDaniel made I thought a little snarky remark, like the way he fell, what he did on Sunday had no attachment to tonight. Yes, it did, Mike. Yes, it did. That's one of the things you learn, that once you have a concussion, the likelihood of another concussion, especially in a short amount of time, is coming. Here's the other thing. With concussion protocol, we throw that out there in sports on a sports timeline. In other words, if something happens in the second quarter, we want that thing sped up. We want to figure it out quickly. Get him into protocol so he can be back in the third quarter or at the end of the second. But concussions don't work that way. And if you're going to do the protocol the right way, it might be that player is out of the game for the complete test. For the complete test, it's not always going to reveal itself in a nice, tidy 10 minutes or 15 minutes. It may take a little bit longer, or maybe there's nothing there initially, but then something else develops after 15 or 20 minutes. And we got to be patient with that instead of just saying, well, he went to the tent, he went to the locker room, hey, game's got about 18 minutes left, go back out there, you're cleared. So, I mean, Bert, there's a lot that needs to be corrected here.
And football is worse because there's only 17 games, right? And so this isn't like, a Tuesday night in Sacramento for a basketball team. And I think that raises the stakes, and that probably makes the people who are charged with making the decisions less qualified to make those decisions, right? Because they're not just thinking, oh, well, we'll have him back on Thursday. In a lot of cases, because of the stakes in every NFL game, they're weighing the stakes. Like subconsciously, I guarantee you're weighing the stakes. Like if that was against, let's just say that's the Dolphins against the Texans, right? And I'm not picking on the Texans here, but the Dolphins against the Texans in week 6, and they're winning by 4 touchdowns, right? And it's the end of the third quarter. What happens? Does Tua go back in that game? No. Right?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Right.
Like, and that to me is like the context of it. Like you have to look at that context. And I think we'd be naive to think that the stakes don't play into this, and in each situation, how careful you're being with other injuries too. Like how careful, like we all talked about Justin Herbert last week, right? Brandon Staley probably should have pulled him at the end of that game because why? Because it was a blowout. But that's not a head injury. But that's not a head injury. You know what I mean?
But it's still putting, and I'm glad you brought it up because I mean it's a natural transition of guys, and you made the excellent point. The quarterbacks sometimes want to go above and beyond. So I look at, we didn't get to it yesterday. I had Jim Trotter on. Mm-hmm. I put Justin Herbert and Mac Jones in the same category. Neither one of them with a head injury, but like this, I don't know, pressure they put on themselves, pressure that they sense that their coaches are putting on them, or whatever it is, teammates. They're out there. Mac Jones trying to play with a high ankle sprain that should have him out for a month conservatively. Right. Justin Herbert playing with a rib injury, serious rib injury, in a blowout game. Why? Why is this happening in your opinion?
It's that position. Me and you saw it up close for 20 years here with Brady. Playing with a separated shoulder that was harnessed. Playing with, I think he played with a high ankle sprain at one point. I think it's sort of the ethos of that position. And, you are charged with being the most important person in the organization. You're also charged with leading the team. And how do you build credibility with your teammates, the linemen that are in hand-to-hand combat, literally on every play? Like, how are you building credibility with the people in the locker room? You're building credibility with them by making yourself available. Like, how much credibility do you think Phillip Rivers built up in the Chargers organization after playing in the AFC title game on a torn ACL? That made it so no one was ever going to question him again, right? And that's
okay, but position. No one would question him. But it also, you get credibility, but now you're creating this culture where players are afraid to be physically vulnerable,
right?
And they would say that. I mean, that was one of those things. Rest in power, Junior Seau. But some of the people would say that Seau was such a great leader, but he would be in pain, either physical or emotional pain. But he would never let anybody see it because that's just not what he was trying to do. And so, I mean, on one hand, that's great. On the other, somebody needs to be vulnerable. It's okay to be vulnerable.
Well,
and
what the other part is?
And to keep your job.
The other part of it, Michael, is like when players won't look out for themselves, they need people to look out for them. And I just feel like over the last I've known Mike McDaniel a long time. Like, he is as empathetic an NFL head coach as you'll find. Like, he genuinely cares about people. He cares about his players. So I really believe Mike McDaniel wants to do the right thing. But he's been in this culture forever too. You know what I mean? Like, and so much of this culture, of the culture of the sport, and this is at every level, so much the culture of the sport is, if you can play, if you can physically drag yourself out there, you do it, right? And so, like, I think with the knowledge of the culture and the way that it is, players need people who are looking out for them when they won't look out for themselves, especially with stuff like head injuries that could wind up affecting who they are as people 20, 30 years down the line. And I think over the last 4 or 5 days, the sport of football, the NFL, has probably failed Tua Tagovailoa. And that's a shame, because I think there are a lot of well-intentioned people like McDaniels who had no intent to do that, right? No intent to do that at all. There need to be better mousetraps here, and better ways of catching these sorts of things, and better ways of taking the stakes out of it and making a logical decision. And I think, probably on Sunday, the common sense decision was to yank him off the field. You know what I mean? Like, the common sense decision was he probably shouldn't be out there. And did it make it more likely that he would suffer the injury he did on Thursday? I don't know. I medically, like, I'll plead the fifth on this. I have no idea. The fifth is probably the wrong amendment. You know what I mean? I'll plead ignorance. I'll plead ignorance here.
Plead ignorance.
I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever know medically whether or not what happened on Sunday caused what happened on Thursday night. What I do know is it didn't help. What I do know is it didn't help. And I think
right.
I think looking at what happened on Sunday from a common sense perspective, when you read the NFL's own concussion protocol, leads you to a whole new set of questions. And, you know, in the end, when you're asking those questions, you see these loopholes that are in there. And I guess the big question is, after everything the NFL has been through, and after all the problems the NFL, quite frankly, has caused for itself with its handling of these things in the 80s and 90s, why do these loopholes even exist?
Yeah, they really have a hard time. I mean, recently in the 21st century, and we've got footage of it, of them saying, NFL officials saying, no, we're not sure that football causes any kind of head trauma or we have a concussion problem. They've had a hard time just admitting that. But the thing that just really makes me cringe every time I hear it from McDaniel is that, you know, he says, absolutely, 100%, I have no regrets about Sunday. Well, Mike, how can you watch that video? How do you watch that video and see him stumble around and then say, well, I have no doubt. Okay, let's say I'm mostly sure. If he said, I'm mostly sure we did the right thing, but the video is a little scary. Or right. I know it doesn't look like he has a back injury, doesn't have an ankle injury. But how do you tell people watching that video that he never reached for his back, Bert. He never touched his ankle. He was walking and stumbling. He was wobbling. And he shook his head. It was clear that something was going on.
And I think like that's the other issue. Like the to me, so the issue coming out of that too, and I think this is a huge part of it, right? Is if the team doctor, if the independent neurologist, if the league office got it wrong, and they know they got it wrong on Monday, are they admitting they got it wrong, or are they spending the rest of the week covering for themselves?
Ooh,
and that to me is an operative question too. You know what I mean?
Good
like
question.
if you look at it back and you're like, God, that doesn't look good. Like, are you going back and are you doubling down and saying we need to do everything that we can to make sure that like he's okay, and we need to send him to a specialist, you know, on Monday and Tuesday, and we need to make sure like doubly sure, or are you continually doubling down on it was a back injury? And if now you're talking about the independent neurologist, the team doctor, like all these people now, their jobs are on the line potentially, right? What are they doing? Are they admitting the mistake that they made in such a high profile situation on Sunday, or are they covering something they missed? And now all of a sudden they're rolling the dice and risking that something could happen on Thursday night, like exactly what did happen. I think that's a fair question to ask too.
And, you know, Bert, look, we're talking about what we should be talking about, the lead and the sidebar and the column, you know, old school newspaper terminology. All those things should be on Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins. They did play someone last night, and that team won. And that's not, it's not a parallel story, but, you know, just since we're in the neighborhood, can we talk about the Cincinnati Bengals real quick and what that victory means? Because I think I saw a Bengals team that looked really good and start doing some of the things that made them successful last year. What'd you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think the defense has played pretty well all year for them. And really, if you look at it, like if their long snapper doesn't tear his biceps, which is such a freak thing in the opener, they're 3-1 now, you know? And so I think this is a team that's close to getting to where they were at the same point last year. And I think the key last night and the key against the Jets 5 days ago now, was the offensive line is starting to come together, and you're starting to see them run the ball a little bit better. And you're starting to see Joe Burrow get a little bit more comfortable back there. Whereas early in the game, if you watched him, he looked a little sped up still. And then as the game went on, it felt like he got more comfortable playing from the pocket. And I the last few weeks, I've sort of paralleled this to Kansas City last year. And you remember early in the year last year, everybody's asking the questions, what's wrong with Patrick Mahomes? And have they solved Patrick Mahomes? Patrick Mahomes had 5 new offensive linemen in front of him. And it was almost identical to the situation with the Bengals, where their offensive line issue in Kansas City cost them big time in the Super Bowl. And they just said, you know what? We're going to blow it up and we're going to start over. And because the Chiefs did that last year, they took their lumps, offensively. And this wasn't the whole thing, but a big part of them taking their lumps offensively last year was that they'd turned over the entire offensive line, and cohesion and communication. And those things are so important at those 5 positions. By the end of the year, it was a team strength. So now you look at what the Bengals did. They signed Ted Karras. They signed Alex Kappa. They signed Lyle Collins. They have a rookie starting at the other guard spot. This was always going to take time. And I think now you're starting to see that group come together. I'm not saying they're going to come together like the Chiefs did, where like by the end of the year, the Kansas City offensive line last year was a legitimate team strength, and it remains a team strength now. But I mean, you've got reason to be encouraged it's going that way now. And if that offensive line is fixed, man, like that was a good team last year with an offensive line issue. So if they can turn that into just a good, not even a great, just a good part of their team, like they could wind up being more imposing than they were last year, which is sort of a scary thought.
All right, Bert, appreciate your time, man. Always great talking football with you. You're good with the Buckeyes. That one
was over quick on Saturday night, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it's still ranked third.
Over quick. I don't know if you heard them play jump around in the fourth quarter too.
Yeah. Hey, but here's my problem. I got a problem though. Georgia struggles against Kent State. Okay.
Yep.
Our
satellite school. Yeah.
All right. And they remain number 1. And they remain 1. Come on.
I know. We won by 11. We won by 11 over Notre Dame, and we fell a spot in the rankings. People forget that. Yeah.
Go Buckeyes.
SEC bias. SEC bias, Michael. You know that. It's old as the sport itself.
Bert, they invented football. SEC, right. They invented football, so we got to bow down. We got to defer.
I thought it was created in Ohio, but a bunch of people in the deep south that disagree with me.
Good to see you, Bert.
All right, you too. Thanks, Michael.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.